All right, Baldy, here we roll.
Okay, I'm ready, Carl.
Coming down in 3, 2. Back for another edition of In the Huddle. My man Brian Baldinger is here. I'm Carl Dukes. Put him up. Jason Lockon for a part of this podcast as well. And guys, we are counting down to not only the franchise tag, but also the starter free agency, which is always huge in the NFL, especially coming off the combine. So we have a lot of things to get to here over the next 35, 40 minutes or so. But listen, we got to start with this Russell Wilson news because, Baldy, I'm looking at this thing now, and I'm starting to realize this is probably going to go down as the worst trade maybe in NFL history with what the Broncos gave up, what they got in return, and now taking an $85 million cap hit. I don't know where Russ is going to end up. We'll see. But let's talk about this situation in circumstances.
Well, Carl, you also have to factor in that they paid for Sean Payton as well.
That's right.
I mean, you have to add that in because I don't know if Sean Payton goes to Denver, if Russell Wilson doesn't need to be fixed and rehabbed and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, you have to factor in they gave up on number 1 and number 2 to get Sean Payton into Denver as well.
Yeah, and so from a draft pick standpoint and draft capital, they don't have enough to move down and make a move to go get one of these quarterbacks in the draft. That's number 1. So that's why that matters. And then number 2, now you're cap strapped, even though the cap went up. And again, the NFL is growing. We know that. But I don't care what team you are, Baldy. 2 years, you break this up over 2 years now with the cut when it happens before the start of the league year. It's still an absorbent amount of money. And I think now, what are we talking about for the Broncos? 3 years before they get back to where they want to, be as far as the cap and certainly having draft picks to do something with?
Well, I just wonder just how toxic it is in Denver, Carl. Honestly, because their best if Russell, if he was just Russell, I mean, he had a pretty good season last year. Let's face it. I mean, there wasn't much around him. But, I mean, you're just going to take $85 million off the books over the next 2 years. You're going to be a third of your salary cap each of the next 2 years is going to Russell Wilson just to cut him loose. Like, whatever their option is it really that much better not to keep Russell around for this season?
Yeah.
Like, that to me says Sean Payton's like, look, I don't care what we do. Let's just move on. Like, that's what it says to me. Because if it was amenable, if it was workable, you'd go, well, let's build around him this year. Let's just keep building. Let's go compete. But they're like saying, no, let's just scratch it. Let's scrap it and let's just start new with as few assets and resources as you possibly can have right now.
Baldy, this may be unfair, but this is how I'm thinking about this, and this is what is crazy to me. There are guys you may not like how they play, but I feel like this is personal.
Yes.
And that Sean Payton, who has been brilliant at what he's done, and he's a Super Bowl champion, personally just doesn't like this dude. Yeah. And therefore, I'm ready to move on, regardless of what it's going to mean for me long-term, because, again, he's going to get his money. And I'm talking about Sean Payton, right? Yeah. Whether he gets fired in 2 years or whatever happens, he's going to get his money. But the crazy thing to me is in the NFL, and Baldy, we know all these guys, you may not like the way a guy plays, but you can deal with it. You kind of cope with it.
Happens all the time. Happens all the time, Carl.
But to not like a guy and do this, I mean, like that is where I have to draw the line and say, are you really doing what's best for the organization?
Well, I mean, I think somebody is going to go out there and do one of these social media timeline things about, you don't get your own office, Russell. Like, you sitting with the other quarterbacks, all the way to, the shouting match on the sideline, which they try to downplay, but obviously when something like that happens, that didn't look good. And so, I feel like and I think in some ways, maybe Sean was just literally, maybe he was just bestowed and he was spoiled by Drew.
Yeah.
How coachable Drew was. He was the perfect student. Like, how he married with Drew. Like, not everybody can be Drew Brees, obviously. Not even close. From a talent standpoint, an ability standpoint, preparation standpoint, lifestyle, how he mingled in the locker room. Like, I just feel like maybe Drew spoiled Sean to some degree. And that hey, sometimes you have to get along with somebody that you might not personally love, but you got to make work. And to your point, I feel very strongly the same way you do, Carl.
So what's interesting, guys, this is In the Huddle. Subscribe, like us, watch us in the Huddle Pod on YouTube. And we're all about ball. We're all about the NFL and all the things that go on in the offseason and certainly throughout the course of the season. Brian Baldinger, Carl Dukes, and, of course, Jason Lockon 4. We're talking about Russell Wilson. Here's the deal. Now you look at this, and this is the fallout from this, right? So now I'm looking at this free agent class. Russ is going to get to pick wherever he wants to go, right? The money is he's going to get his money from them. Now, where do I go for the best situation? I'm looking at, and I continue to hear that the Bears want to trade Justin Fields. So that is out there. And whether you want to go get a young guy that you feel like you can revive or at least get a lot better, make him a lot better. And then there's the Kirk Cousins thing. So, Baldy, as we approach free agency into next week, you start thinking, all right, what is the best option? And Cousins is coming off of an Achilles. Justin, I think the coaching wasn't there in Chicago, but he still needs to improve and has to do some things, that he's got to get better at. And then I'm looking at Russell Wilson. Baldy, I think Russ is the best option. Like, if I had a chance to go get either one of these guys right now, and I know Kirk Cousins has been great, but Russ, I just feel like if you put him on one of these teams where they buy into him and they support him, you're going to get 35 touchdowns and probably be in the playoffs with Russell Wilson.
Well, there's a lot there. There's a lot. What you just said, Carl, there's a lot. So there's a financial component. Like, let's just say, I feel like Justin Fields is going to get moved. And he's going to get moved before free agency. So probably sometime this week. So I think that's the first chip that has to fall. He's 25. He's got everything in front of him, but you got to pay. You got to pay Justin Fields. Like, I don't think Russell Wilson is getting $35 million. Like, he might have an incentive-laden deal, but he's not getting top dollar. Not as a free agent. Not at age 35. Not after coming off 3 subpar seasons over the last 3 years. So, including his last year in Seattle. So, but that being said, I mean, the Raiders, the Falcons. I mean, you can start lining up teams where you go, I'll take a 35-year-old Russell Wilson, knowing his commitment, love of the game, what he has accomplished, all that, and go, I could plug and play this guy for at least the next 2 years.
Right.
And we'll have a chance to go to the playoffs, and let's see. And it won't preclude me from going out and drafting a quarterback. Like, okay, Russell, we're gonna sign you, but we're also drafting a guy. Maybe not at the very top here, but maybe a Bo Nix. Who knows? Maybe, whatever. Like, I could see some of these teams doing that right now and putting him in that category.
All right, Baldy, and we're going to wait to see where all this goes. Listen, I'd love to predict all of this, but realistically right now there's just too many players involved and too many teams and too many moving parts. So for us to do that is foolish because we come back next week and go, well, that didn't happen. We're not into that. We react to the things that happen here. And so I'd love to say these are the spots where I think they're going to go. A lot of people are already predicting where Russ is going to go. He's going to stay in that division and go and play for the Raiders, whatever. We'll wait to see how that shakes out. Let's talk about, as we've been doing all offseason now, as we've gotten past the Super Bowl, offseason needs for Green Bay, for Buffalo, and for Tampa. We started from the back. We're moving to the front as we continue to work our way down. And I want to start with the Green Bay Packers because I looked at Jordan Love. Did he prove to me last year he was a franchise quarterback, Baldy? Yes. But I can't give him an extension yet, right? I got to let him play this out and show me again this season because I think that's the smart play. What do the Packers do with Jordan Love? Let's start there first and foremost.
Well, I think he showed enough. Like the price, look, salary cap is over $250 million, probably $10 more million than anybody thought. So that's the direction it's going. So Jordan Love is only going to cost you more money next year than he is this year. Like I said midseason, this is their own. They got it. They figured this guy out.
Yeah.
Like I don't see, even if you went to the draft this year, I don't see anybody that's going to play. Maybe Caleb, I don't know. Who knows? But I think Jordan Love is the guy. So I had no problem if Green Bay says, let's lock him up for the next 5 years now. I'd have no problem saying that. And working. Now, if they want to play it out Okay, that gives you more money. I mean, looks like Aaron Jones is either going to take a pay cut or he's going to get moved. They're not bringing back, the other running back, A.J. Dillon. So, at some point you go, all right, we got to draft a guy. Okay, no big deal. They got Aaron Jones in the 5th round, out of Texas El Paso. So we just saw the combine. I mean, running backs in every round. And they look like they can run too, pretty well. So anyways, I think it starts with Jordan Love. What they did with their young receivers last year, Dontavius Wicks, Jaden Reed, all these guys. It was impressive how quickly they got them on the field, how quickly they meshed, and how quickly they became successful and, played really, really well. So, I mean, I just think you just keep building around them. Offensive linemen, I kind of like their line, but if you wanted to try to upgrade in this tackle class, you'd be crazy not to take one of these guys right now. There's a lot of franchise level tackles in this draft.
Baldy, as we talk about Jordan Love, and I want to talk about this wide receiving core too, we're going down back to front, guys, talking about team needs, teams that we saw late in the playoffs, starting in the back of the draft and working our way down. You've done Baldy's breakdowns. We talked about this way early in the season, I think. Maybe it was week 4 or 5, and you were talking about the angles, right? The arm angles and how he releases the ball.
Yeah.
Let's go back to that a little bit, because that has become a big deal in the NFL. It used to be, can he just throw the football?
Yeah.
Now it's arm angle and release point, and I think I'm talking about baseball more than I am football. But he has all of that, right? I mean, he's got all of that stuff. And then I think as the season went along, I saw Jordan early in the season. I thought his confidence grew. Like he became more comfortable. And then part of that is he didn't have Watson out for most of the season, but Jaden Reed and Wicks, all these guys stepped up. They got a great wide receiving core. So how does that coexist now moving forward with the youth of that team and Jordan Love being able to do what he does with his arm?
Well, let's just go back to the arm angles and what we saw. Because what's happened now, Carl, and why it is important is no longer are we finding Tom Brady's. They're just sitting in the pocket and throwing from one platform. These guys are on the move, right, left, backing up. I mean, Jordan Love's ability just to back up and make throws and bend it. Okay, the only way I can get it with Chris Jones running at me in my face is to bend that thing like Tiger Woods around the oak tree.
Yeah.
Like it's got to come out from different angles right now to complete, not just complete passes, but a high percentage of passes. And I think you're being, you're rolling out, you're bootlegging, you're rolling to your left, you're thrown back across your body, to the middle of the field. Arm angles are important now. And so I think Jordan Love displayed that throughout the season. Like some of his throws, you had to put it in a Baldy breakdown type thing. You had to slow it down and look at it just to appreciate it, Carl, to appreciate he's got all of that. And everybody's looking for that. That's why Zach Wilson was drafted number 2. They thought he had that. He didn't have the other things that Jordan Love has. But, for him to build the chemistry with Watson, with, Romeo Doubs, with Wicks, with Reed, so quickly, we had never seen that in Green Bay. It had always, going back to Bart Starr and Favre, and then, Aaron, it took time to build that level of chemistry with receivers. He did it on the fly this year. That was really impressive to me.
No doubt about it. Let's talk about the defensive side of the football for the Packers. Needs, running back, they got to draft one. They've got a young wide receiving core. What about David Bakhtiari, by the way? They move on from him? I know he's been injured. He's going to be a cap casualty, you believe? They move on?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, we all appreciate what David was a 4th-round pick, came in this league, became a first-team All-Pro player, was graded out at the highest in his position 1 year. But it's 3 straight years now where he's been devastated by injuries. And typically, as you get older, those injuries don't go away. Yeah. And I think, look, I wish David the best. I wish anybody that's had an injury run of bad luck like he has to get back and get through a season. But I think he's probably going to have to take a low contract someplace else and see if he can get back to his form. All right. But, I saw Rasheed Walker play well. He's a 7th-round pick. I like Rasheed Walker. Now, whether he's a long-term answer, I don't know. You look at Zach Tom at right tackle. All those guys, they've drafted all those guys. John Runyon. All these guys have been homegrown, drafted. Some of the things that, Aaron said back in the day about, Brian Gutekunst and how they've drafted really well. All those receivers I just mentioned, they drafted them. They got them on the field and they played them. Their offense line, all homegrown. I mean, they draft them and they coach them up. And they're not big players in free agency. They never have been. Because typically in free agency, Carl, the reason why you're going there and the reason why you overpay in free agency is because you missed in the draft.
Yep.
Well, you can't say they've missed in the draft. You could say maybe some of the defensive players, possibly. That's why they got Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith at one time. But, Rasheed Gary is a hell of a player. It was a good first-round pick out of Michigan. So, I don't know. They've done well the way that they've operated right now. I don't think that's going to change.
Real quick, new defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley. Do they switch to a 4-3? And if they do, Baldy, from what you know right now, we know the personnel could change a little. Do they have the personnel to do that if they end up switching? I think he's a 4-3 guy, but I don't know if that's what they're going to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely, they have the personnel. I mean, you get Preston on one side, you get Rasheed on the other side. They drafted last year Lucas Van Ness. He played off the edge. They got nothing but first-round picks on their defense. Quay Walker, and, you look at what they got in the defensive front. I mean, they have the depth and they have the players to play a 4-3. And honestly, outside of some base defense, they're basically a 4-3 defense as it is. I mean, as quickly as you can get to a four-man front and get after the quarterback, 2nd and 9, 2nd and 13, I mean, you're getting your four-man front team. So unless they're running the ball really well on you, you're typically that's what you are.
Yeah, 4-3, 3-4. I know people get caught up in it. I just think that the hybrids now are so intermixed and meshed. You can look at fronts, and certainly it changes as the clock runs down, and they bring up guys, and it all changes. We got a lot more to get to, including Buffalo. They've got a lot of needs. We're going to tell you what they are when we come back on In the Huddle. Carl Dukes, along with my man Brian Baldinger here in the Huddle, guys. Subscribe, like us, and of course, watch us on YouTube at In the Huddle Pod. Let's talk about the Buffalo Bills, Baldy. We're going back to front. Again, we just talked about Green Bay. Let's talk about Buffalo. Just off the top of my head, okay? And it's a lot. Wide receiver, defensive end, defensive tackles, and I think they need safeties. That is a lot to do in one offseason. Now, they may have some ideas about how they want to fill the voids, but let's start with wide receiver because Diggs is 31 during the season next season. He turns 31 in 2024, but you've got to go get another explosive guy opposite him, right? I mean, this has kind of been Buffalo's issue.
Well, they went out and got Dalton Kincaid last year, and that was a good pickup. They have two in Dawson Knox and Kincaid. They got two tight ends. They went to a lot of two tight end sets. They're both excellent receivers. Kincaid can become an elite player. Gabriel Davis has just not really stepped up into that number 2 role. We've seen flashes of it, but we haven't really seen it. When you have Josh Allen, and look, he's still dynamic. He's right in his prime, and he's got a bunch of years left. But you got to keep stocking the shelves. You got to keep trying to get him that guy. I think Diggs is just fine. Like, he can take on your number 1 corner. He can beat cover. Like, he's an elite player. But when they weren't getting the ball to him last year, their offense looked like it stalled quite a bit. I thought that James Cook really gave him a pop in the run game. I thought once they changed their offensive coordinators last year, they leaned on the run game a lot more. But let's face it, when you got Josh Allen, you don't want to get too far away from throwing the football around the yard. He's just that good. He can extend plays that well. Yes, I think they and there's a lot of receivers to look at, but I don't. The only caution I would have is if you go out and you spend your first round pick or second on a receiver, and does this upset Stephon Diggs? Like, it looks like if he's not getting targeted 12 to 15 times, there's, it looks like it drives him nuts.
Yeah.
So I just don't know. Like, it looks like it's very tempestuous sometimes with Diggs out there. And like we're reading body language. We're not, and that's not really fair to Diggs or to Josh or whatever, but that's what we're doing. That's what we did last offseason. And you just wonder if you go out and you get a dynamic playmaker the way Green Bay did last year, is that going to upset Diggs? And then you have to deal with that.
Yeah, I look at Buffalo and I feel like, and it's not that they're underachieving. It's just they've got to get over this hump, right? How do they get over this hump? We know Kansas City's been in the way, and this was supposed to, again, be the year when you have home field advantage. So let's talk about the defensive side of football. Von Miller, no sacks. Is he washed? He looked like it. Leonard Floyd, Epinesa, Shaq Lawson, all free agents. These are some big shoes to fill, and even if they can't bring one or two of those guys back, Baldy, how do they deal with this as far as the defensive side? I think Ed Oliver is the best player on defense. He's coming back, but how do you help him?
Well, they were decimated by injuries. I mean, Matt Milano, Tre'Davious White. I mean, just one good player after another. They all went down last year. And so, they were playing A.J. Klein at linebacker. He was literally on his couch somewhere, and next thing you know, he's starting. Like 5 days later, hadn't played at all year, preseason, anything. But he knew the system. And he comes in, he's playing a playoff game. So you have to – these guys are going to come back, and so that's a factor. But they need pass rush. I mean, that's why they drafted all those guys, some of these defensive ends, Rousseau, and Epinesa. Like, okay, we got to get after Mahomes. That's why they signed Von Miller. We have to get after Mahomes. We have to affect the quarterback, especially when we get to the playoffs. And so whether it was Joe Burrow the year before, I think they need to look at a dynamic edge rusher. I think that Sean McDermott knows that. I think the organization knows that. Rousseau is fine, but he hadn't become an elite player yet, where you have to really concentrate and focus on him. So I think it's a huge need right now. I think some of these guys are going to get back at linebacker and corner. All right, but I feel like that's a priority position for them and most teams in this league right now.
Brandon Beane, the general manager. Is there any pressure there? Like, is this thing building not only with him, but McDermott too? Like, right? I mean, you've had really good teams. You can't get there. Like, how big of an offseason is this for Brandon Beane and McDermott, in your opinion, Baldy?
I think it's important. I mean, I don't think they're in danger of being moved on from. I think that they're quality. I mean, they're really good at what they do, but they could use a great offseason to elevate them right now. The way, I mean, you think about the backbone, and obviously Kansas City has Mahomes and Kelce, okay. But Rashee Rice was a big addition. Isaiah Pacheco was a huge addition. All those guys on defense, whether it's
drafted guys.
They drafted guys. They struck gold in the draft, and then they developed them. They got them on the field. So look, they have owned that division. Okay, they've owned the AFC East for the last 4 years, but the next attention is what is Kansas City doing that we've got to, get past them. And so what they've done is they've drafted really well and they've developed really well. And so, if you're Buffalo, you're Brandon Beane, you're like, Kansas City drafted 6 players on defense and they all contribute 2 years ago. And Trent McDuffie is a star, and so Karlaftis is an excellent player. Leo Chenal was a huge player in the playoffs, huge for them against Baltimore and in the Super Bowl. So I would say that, this draft is really important for them if they want to try to get past Kansas City right now.
All right, Baldy, let's talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and we're also going to hit some of the other stories around the NFL, including Kelce retiring, not that Kelce, the other one, and also a couple of other things here. But Tampa Bay, as we take a look at their needs, first it's Baker Mayfield, right? Tampa, they got to figure out their quarterback situation. And if you haven't heard over the last few days, Mike Evans signs or will sign a 2-year deal once the league year becomes official. He gets an extension. He's going to be there. That's a big deal for them to bring Mike Evans, and Mike being there, hopefully finishing up his career. He's a Hall of Famer, in my opinion, Baldy, with what he's done over the last 10 seasons. But Baker Mayfield, let's talk about Baker. Is he the answer? Is that the guy you trust right now when you say, hey, is there a better option out there? If you're Tampa, are you in the quarterback market, or do you just feel like, hey, bringing Baker back with new hired offensive coordinator Liam Cohen is the best option?
I think it's the best option. And I think they're going to sign Baker. Yeah, maybe it's a 2-year deal. But I think Baker likes being there. I think they like Baker. He played well. They won a playoff game. I think right now he's still very young. He's found a home. I think, they still were a team that was very challenged running the football. I think that's a priority to run it better. I would imagine they're going to try to upgrade where they can on the offensive line. Rashad White was fine, but everybody needs a number 2. So I feel like they're turning the corner, and Baker was a big part of them turning the corner, turning the page from Brady and the way that they operated there. I was happy to see them keep Mike Evans. I know he wanted to stay. He's a Hall of Fame player. He's a phenomenal player. And he had an unbelievable season. And part of that season was the connection he had with Baker. Like, Baker throws a good deep ball. He got it to Mike. They took off. They connected. It was a big part of their success. And so, I think they have been gradually rebuilding the defensive line. Kalijah Kelce last year, Yaya Diaby, like some of these guys that they've been drafting look like they're going to be good players. So I think Baker is a big part of this, and I would be shocked if they don't get a deal done for Baker right now. I don't think they have to pay him top dollar. I don't think he's going to come in that type of salary of Lamar and some of the salary contracts we saw last year. But I think there's something there that's fair for Baker. I think he recognizes that. I don't think he has to break the bank. But I think Baker showed you that with stability, with an offseason, with good players around him, that he can play at a good level.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that's probably the right choice.
He threw 28 touchdowns against 10 receptions last year, Carl.
Yeah.
And that's one first year. All right, now Canales is gone. All right, new guy, new system. Okay, but Baker's a smart guy. He knows how to learn it off. He had to learn enough offenses in Cleveland, and in Carolina. So he'll figure that part out. But I think, I heard like during the draft, hey, Baker could be a free agent. Okay, I would be interested in talking to Baker in free agency for sure. But I just don't think he's going to get to that point. I think there's going to get an agreement done.
You know what's crazy, Baldy? It's Brian Baldinger, guys. Carl Dukes in the Huddle. Subscribe and like us. Tell your friends as we talk ball, all NFL, and we're getting closer and closer to free agency. I was just taking a look at this because I was, talking with Mike. We were talking a couple of days ago, and I was congratulating him. And I said, it's crazy to think that 7 different quarterbacks have been thrown to this guy and what he's done. So you go back to 2013, Mike Glennon, right, was the quarterback.
Yeah.
Then you get to Josh McCown.
Yeah.
And the point is, he's put up numbers regardless of who has been throwing him the ball, right? He had 729 yards with Josh McCown, and nobody even talks about it. Then Jameis Winston gets drafted, and he has, a good 3 or 4 years with Winston. And then, of course, you talk about Ryan Fitzpatrick was the starting quarterback there.
Yep.
And then you get to Blaine Gabbert.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. This is all this is all before Tom Brady gets there. He has 2 amazing seasons, right, with Brady, 3,100 yards for him. And now here's Baker Mayfield. To me, Baldy, that's greatness. Like, I don't care who's throwing the ball. When it's thrown to me, I'm going to make plays. And that, to me, like, we blame quarterbacks all the time being not good enough and not being able to deliver the football. This dude is like, I don't care. I'm going to make my numbers. I'm going to get my catches, going to get my yak, and I'm going to score touchdowns. That, to me, is why Mike Evans is such a big piece.
He had 13 touchdown catches last year, Carl.
Crazy.
13. He could possibly be the number 1 red zone threat in this league right now. Like, when they put him isolated out there one-on-one, and you want to let Mike go to work, whether it's a pivot route or a fade or whatever it is, like, nobody takes the ball off the rim the way Mike Evans does, and he can still run past people, he still has. You really haven't seen anything slow down. There's just, he's a Galveston kid, Texas kid. Like, there's a toughness to him. I remember at the NFL Honors Party in LA a couple years ago, I spent some time with Mike at the bar, him and his wife, and he was up for Man of the Year. And he was nervous, like if he got the award, his speech, he's just a very he's a great teammate, but he's a very caring individual and a highly, highly competitive guy. I mean, I just go back the matchups with him and Marshawn Lattimore. It's a battlefield, those two guys when they went at it. But he's just like, there has been no slowdown in him. And I don't see any. Like, people say, well, he's declining. No, he's right. The level of consistency is amazing. 10 straight years of 1,000 yards. I mean, nobody's ever done it.
Baldy, we need to talk about a couple of news notes here as we move along here. And I just want to ask you first about two things.
Yeah.
NFL season expansion, maybe adding another game. And then your combine thoughts, because coming off the combine, we all get excited about the potential of some of these players. And I just want to ask you who really stood out for you, whether it be quarterbacks or otherwise. I know you watch all the old linemen as well, and you're big on that, as you should be, because those are the building blocks. But let's start with the expansion. What are the odds that we add another game? Is this realistic for the NFL? Does it make sense? Are we at the breaking point right now? Because these are things that are being talked about.
Carl, if you just look at the league right now and see how many guys survive a 17-game schedule. Like, we just saw the combine. I'm only bringing it up because they're just getting bigger, stronger, and faster, Carl.
True.
Okay? Like, I remember, Dick Butkus was the guy that we all watched growing up. He ran a 5-flat 40. Well, you can't get on the field with a 5-flat 40. Okay? Roquan Smith is running in the 4.4s. Devin White's running in the 4.4s. And the point is, it's just hard to survive, no matter how many rule changes they make. The drop tackle will probably get outlawed. Whatever, the horse collar. You can try to legislate this game as much as you want. This is a contact sport. These guys are bigger, stronger. This kid, J.C. Latham, we watched him. He's my number one tackle. He's 300. He's a house. He's a house, Carl. He's 340 pounds.
Yeah.
We didn't see that 10 years ago. We just didn't see it. So they want to go to 18 games, and they're going to get there, Carl. But don't tell me it's about player safety. If you want to tell me it's about finances, it's about growing the game, you tell me all that stuff. But if you play an 18-game regular schedule, I mean, nobody's playing the preseason. That's done. You could short it to 3 games to 2 games, and it'll eventually be 2 games. And I believe it's going to be an 18-game schedule. But don't tell me it's about player safety. Not when they're bigger, stronger, faster, and now we're inching towards going to 18 games. And then an extra playoff game, right? So now you play 18 regular season, you're playing wild card weekend, and you get to the Super Bowl, you're playing 4 more games, you're playing 22 games.
It's unbelievable.
So, and then you look at, forget about the injuries. Just look at how many players, because we're going to get to a player here in a second that just lined up and played every single game, every year, and the number of guys that can do that now is just fewer and fewer. And I don't care what the name of the back of the jersey is, and I don't care about what the position is. There's just very few guys that can go out and play a 17-game schedule right now.
Yeah, I don't know. We're all football fans from afar. I mean, Baldy, you played. I've been lucky enough to be around it all my life, and being on the field and being around guys and seeing the bumps and the bruises and the wrapped ankles and the wrist, and that most fans don't see. That stuff is during the week of practice, and it's you'd never know on Sunday, but these guys are banged up, and it's just – when we talk about expanding and adding another week, I'm like, my good. I'm all for it because as a fan, I want to see more football. But I don't know, as your point is, about the health of players.
Well, two things, Carl. One, I tell, and I've said this on our podcast before, but for every fan out there or ex-player that says the game is too soft, whatever, I said, just go on Sundays. Yeah, pick a stadium, go on Sunday, and stand on the sidelines and close your eyes and just hear the hit. Just listen to it and tell me if you just don't cringe when you hear the violence of these contacts. I don't care what the play is. That's number one. Number two, when you get to an 18-game schedule, because we're starting to see it now, even in an 18-game schedule, it begins to get a little diluted, Carl.
Yes.
We didn't think the Kansas City Chiefs had it in them.
Right.
Honestly, they looked a little bored to me when they weren't winning games and they were struggling in games, losing to Green Bay and, whatever. They looked a little bored to me. And then the playoffs, they just okay, let's go. Time to play. And I feel like if you get to an 18-game schedule, does every game really matter?
That's a great point.
Honestly, we know in the NBA, and I'm not here to trash the NBA, but we know in the NBA, not every game matters. We know that. It's about surviving the season to get to the postseason. But I feel like if you get to 18 games, not every game matters.
Yeah, there was, and again, we don't want to sit here and talk about when we were, but there was an urgency when we had 14 games in the NFL.
Yes.
Right? You can go back to 12 games. I mean, you couldn't screw around. You had to win. You had to win, and if you weren't winning, you weren't getting in the playoffs. There was no expanded playoffs. Then we moved to 14, and it's then 16, and you were like, okay, I'm with you. I mean, there has to be a sense of urgency week to week, which is what makes the league special, right?
Well, look, I mean, if you went to 18 games, because I've already been saying this, Carl, for years now. It used to be that August was really important. Preseason, building the roster, okay, getting back to tackling, and then you hit the season running. Well, honestly, September right now is like the old August. I feel like September right now is what August used to be.
Yeah.
Because your record in September doesn't make any difference right now. The only thing that matters in September is fixing what isn't working. And so everybody's like, oh, opening week. Honestly, when you get to an 18-game schedule, that opening weekend, whether you win or lose, doesn't really matter. All that matters is that, okay, we need a new right guard. We can't throw the ball 50 times with this line. We got to figure out a different way of doing. That's how New England used to operate in September. They didn't care what the record was. The important thing was we got to figure out the way to play with the roster that we have, and we're going to adjust. And I feel like if you get to 18 games, September really isn't going to matter. It's let's get to November playing great football.
Yeah, because you still got 3 more months. All right, a couple other things. Combine thoughts before we get to, I think, a future Hall of Famer. What jumped out at you at the Combine?
Well, I think a couple things. One, Saturday was really fun because the crowd was into it. When Xavier Worthy, ran that. I mean, look, you can debate the Combine all you want, and there's things that you can take from it, and there's things that are just I don't understand. Like to put an offensive lineman on his back and get up off his back and go run makes no sense to me. But I get it. But like my girlfriend doesn't know anything about football. She enjoyed watching the Combine. Because you get it for the first time, really, you put a real face on a lot of these guys. Yeah. And you see the emotion, how they interact. You kind of get to know the kids personally. You get to know J.J. McCarthy. You get to know Michael Penix. You get to see how they operate. I think that's really cool. But Saturday was really fun. I mean, the quarterbacks threw, the receivers ran. We saw, 4-2-1. Who's going to be the next guy to break a 4-2, Carl? Because it's coming. Somebody's going to break 4-2. But I thought that was really good. I thought, as we thought, this was going to be a really deep draft, an offensive lineman. And what you see is these kids take this stuff serious. You don't see the fat kids. There's no fat guys anymore, Carl.
Yeah.
These kids are 320 pounds, and they're motoring. They're running their 5 flats. They're jumping out of the gym. They come, and they aren't just big guys anymore. They're big guys that are great athletes. Joe Alt, the way that he moves and runs. And so that's that. And then you just see, you look at the receivers. Rome Odunze is you put that guy, I remember, we all remember when Julio came out. Julio was the benchmark. But I feel like with Marvin, with Rome, with some of these guys, we're going to see another Julio in this draft.
Yeah.
Somebody at that level, that when Julio came out.
It's a deep wide receiver draft. It was fun to watch. You get a sense of the guys, and now they'll go to their pro workouts, and we'll see how that plays out for guys like Caleb and Jaden Daniels, who did not throw at the combine. As we finish up, it's In the Huddle, guys. Subscribe and like us. Watch us on YouTube, In the Huddle Pod. Baldy, 13 seasons in the league is one thing, but 13 productive seasons is another. And that is what happened with Jason Kelce as he announced his retirement this week. I love the dude because for me, he's an underachiever who achieved more than anybody ever thought. A walk-on at Cincinnati. Walk-on. Then gets drafted late. 6th round pick.
191st pick.
Baldy. And then turns into one of the best NFL centers we've ever seen. I mean, it's crazy. So, first and foremost, congratulations to Jason Kelce. He made it official. He's going to the Hall, guys. 7-time Pro Bowler, 6-time All-Pro, whatever it is. But it's the charisma and the likability too, Baldy. That is why I think people dig Jason Kelce. He does this retirement press conference in a sleeveless shirt. I mean, that's Jason Kelce.
There's so many. So I wanted to honor Jay. So I texted Lane Johnson, his teammate for the last 11 years, early in the day because I knew that he was having a press conference. So I said, so I just texted Lane, like, is this to announce his retirement? And he said, yeah. So they won't. So I kind of knew what was coming. So I wanted to do something to honor Jason. So, he's a 6th round pick, 191st player taken out of Cincinnati. Nobody knew who Jason. He started day one for the Eagles. So I went back. His first game was 9/11/2011 against the Rams in the TWA Dome. And already, the team with Mike Vick, Deshaun Jackson, Shady McCoy, the team was loaded. But there's Jason Kelce starting at center. And little did we know that on 9/11/2011, he was going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. 2029, he's walking into the Hall. Yeah. He got hurt. I never forget. In his second year, 2012, they were playing the Ravens in their home opener. And I was announcing the game. And he got hit low in the game, and he tore his MCL and ACL. And he missed the rest of that season. And then he went and he started every game for the next 11 straight years, including the postseason. He had 205 starts, most ever by a Philadelphia Eagle. It's just 6 first-team All-Pro nominations. The accolades just kept coming. But he was so much more than the accolades, Carl. He was like the heartbeat of Philadelphia. He wore a mummer's outfit, for the Super Bowl parade. He got Philadelphia. And not many teams, first of all, not many people get Philadelphia. But he just got it. He's going to raise his 3 girls there. He's going to be there. That's where he's going to make his home. But he just was one of these, played at the highest level. But then all the other commitments off the field, showing up for this thing, running. He was just a remarkable person. You can't stop gushing about what he represents and who he is.
Yeah, whatever he wants to do, he'll be great at. Who knows where he's going to end up? In some network. I mean, hell, Baldy, you could be working next to him. Who knows? At the end of the day, he's going to be really good because he's fun. He knows what he's talking about. And I think people just dig him.
One quick thing, Carl. I really applauded the announcement. I think people should, all athletes at any sport, should look at leaving the party before the party ends.
Yeah.
We all seen too many that stay too long. But he's got 3 young girls, and his body is, nobody knows it. He doesn't ever complain about it, but body's
back up. Yeah.
He still could play at the highest. He can still be an all-pro center next year. He could do it. But as a guy that played 12 and tried to play a 13th year, you don't know the beating your body takes until 5 years later. Forget about 10 or 20. I want him to play with his girls, whatever that is, for as long as he possibly can. And if you play another year, maybe you do get the serious injury. Maybe it does take more toll on your body. Leave before the party ends. Yes, the check for $12 or $14 million is there. And that's hard to say no to for anybody.
Yeah.
I get that. But he's he's got the podcast. He's going to have all kinds of opportunities. Like, you're going to have to move on and transition. Like this, he's picking a good time. And he's hinted at retirement last year, the year before, thought about it, came back, played, okay, won a Super Bowl, tried to run it back. He picked the right time.
Guys, we have a lot to get to next week. Legal tampering, free agency, and we're all over it right here on In the Huddle. Make sure you subscribe and don't miss an episode. Baldy, we will talk to you soon. Thank you guys for being here. And we got a lot more football to get to here this offseason.
Yep.
Baldy, take care, brother. Great stuff.
Okay. Thanks, Carl. Yep, you bet.
You guys have a great day.